before each chapter, we get a little paragraph that's like a foreshadowing of what's about to happen in the chapter. Like it's an excerpt, like a little piece from another book. So like this one is from the Jungle Book, and it'll be like, it'll tell you kind of what's about to happen in the chapter, like a little, it's like a teaser trailer, maybe. Greetings. I don't know how to say your name. Let's kick subs, second class people. Duppy. Totally not Duppy, though. Boodsiar. Budsiar. Reading stimulates. Ow! The brain. Ow! I could use some of that. Brain stimulation. Okay. Yeah, this excerpt is from the Jungle Book. And then I have it, said Bagheera, leaping up. Go thou down quickly to the men's huts in the valley, and take some of the red flower which they grow there, so that when the time comes, thou mayest have even a stronger friend than I, or Baloo, or those of the pack that love thee. Get the red flower. By red flower, Bagheera meant fire. Only no creature in the jungle will call fire by its proper name. Every beast lives in its deadly fear of it. Oh, I need to find my little Tic Tacs. I have no idea where I put them, honestly. And unfortunately, might just have to go and dry today. Whatever. Yeah, this chapter is called Fire, so it's obviously all gonna have something to do with fire, the way things are looking. What? What's she mad about? I can use a pillow too. I want to see more dog. They set out when dusk fell over the hills, leaving Gwen at their camp. After what had happened on their last nighttime visit to Capricorn's village, even Farid could see it was better that way. Silvertongue made him go first. He knew nothing of the boy's fear of ghosts and other nocturnal terrors. Farid had hidden it from him more successfully than he had from Dustfinger. Silvertongue did not mock his fear of the dark either, as Dustfinger had, and curiously enough, that made the fear less, shrinking it as only daylight usually did. But now Farid was going to use something else that Dustfinger thought him too full-heartedly to handle. Fire. They had decided to start a fire next to Capricorn's house so that it would not spread to the hill so fast, but would threaten the only thing Capricorn cared about, his treasure chambers. This time, the village was not quiet and empty as it had been on the previous nights, but was buzzing like a wasp's nest. 4 armed guards were patrolling the parking lot, and cars were parked all around the wire netting fence that surrounded the former football field. Their headlights bathed the area in glaring light as if the bright cloth had been spread out in the dark. Move this. Done reading yet? Nerd. I'm gonna clip it where we're gonna stop reading. How about that? Because we're not gonna read it. Fuck no, I'm not doing that. It's gonna damage. It's gonna cause damage. Okay. Emotional. Okay, stop. So that's where the show's going to take place, whispered Silvertongue as they approached the houses. Poor Meggie. A kind of rostrum had been set up in the middle of this arena with a cage opposite it, perhaps for the monster that Silvertongue's daughter was to read out of the book, perhaps for the prisoners. On the left-hand side of the field, facing away from the wire fence and the village, stood long wooden benches. A few of the blackjackets were already sitting on them like ravens that had found a bright, warm place to spend the night. They had thought of stealing into the village from the parking lot. With so many strangers around, perhaps no one would notice them. But then they decided on a longer, darker route. When Farrad went ahead again, using every tree as a cover, always keeping uphill from the houses until they were above the uninhabited part of the village that looked as if a giant had trodden on it. Even there, more guards than usual were patrolling. They had to keep retreating into the shadows of a gateway, ducking down behind a wall, or climbing through a window and waiting with bated breath, for the guard to pass by. Luckily, there were many dark corners in Capricorn's village, and the guards strolled through the alleys with their boredom, as men do when they are sure there is no threat of danger. Farrad had Dustfinger's backpack with him, containing all they would need to kindle a quick hot fire. Silvertongue carried the wood they had collected in case the flames did not find enough to feed on among the stones. And there were Capricorn stocks of gasoline, too. Farrad had still had the smell of it in his nostrils from the night when they had shut him up in the sheds. The tanks were seldom guarded, but they might not need them. It was a windless night. The flames would burn quietly and steadily. Farrad remembered Dustfinger's warning. Never light a fire when it's windy. The dust will catch hold of it, and it will forget you. It will fan the flames until they leap up and bite you and lick the skin from your bones. But the wind was sleeping tonight, and the still air filled the alleyways like warm water in a bucket. They had hoped to find the square outside Capricorn's house empty, but they were about to enter it from one of the alleys. They saw a half-dozen men were standing outside the church. "Why are they still here?" whispered Farrad as Silvertongue drew him into the shadow of a doorway. "The festivities are about to begin." Two maids came out of Capricorn's house, each with a pile of plates. They were taking them to the church. Obviously, the successful execution was to be celebrated there later. When the maids passed the guards, the men whistled at them. One of the women almost dropped the crockery when one of them tried to lift her skirt with the barrel of his gun. It was the man who had recognized Silvertongue when they slipped into the village the night before. Farrad touched his forehead, which was still blood-stained, and cursed him with the worst curses he knew. Why did he have to be the one there? But even if they got past him unrecognized, how were they going to start a fire while the others were still standing around? "Take it easy," Silvertongue whispered to him. "They'll soon go away. The first thing we have to do is make sure Meggie really has left the house." Farrad nodded, looking at the big house. There were still lights on in two of the windows, but that didn't necessarily mean anything. "I'll sneak down to the football field and see if she's there," he whispered to Silvertongue. Perhaps they had already gotten Dustfinger from the church. Perhaps he was in the cage they had set up, and he could whisper to him that they had brought his best friend Fire to save him. Night shadows filled many of the nooks and crannies among the houses. Despite the brightness of the street lights, Farrad was about to set off, using their shelter, when the door of Capricorn's house opened. The old woman with the face like a vulture came out. She was dragging Silvertongue's daughter along behind her. Farrad hardly recognized Meggie in the long white dress she wore. After them, gun in hand, came the man who had shot at him and Silvertongue. He looked around, took a bunch of keys from his pocket, locked the door, and beckoned to one of the men standing outside the church. He was obviously telling him to guard the house, so only one man would stand on guard while the others went off to see the show. Dang, it just gave me an alert that my headphones were dying. I don't know where are the thingies. I'll just put in my left one next time. I'm not an Uber driver. I'm reading Inkheart. Inkheart by Cornelia Funk. Where was I? Was I even on this page? Oh, I was at the beginning. Every time I do that, whenever I stop at the beginning of a page, I totally forget that I did that, because normally I stop at, the end. I just stop on a random weird spot. Okay. Right, beginning. Ferret felt Silvertongue tensing every muscle as if he wanted to run to his daughter, who looked almost as pale as her dress. The boy clutched his arm in a warning gesture, but Silvertongue seemed to have forgotten him. He had eyes only for the girl. One reckless step and he would be out of the shelter of the shadows. Don't! Ferret pulled him back in alarm. As best he could, he scarcely I read that stupid. Don't! Ferret pulled him back in alarm, as he best could, for he scarcely came up to Silvertongue's shoulder. Luckily, Capricorn's men were watching the old woman as she crossed the square, walking so fast that the girl stumbled over the hem of her dress a couple times. She looks so pale, whispered Silvertongue. Heavens, do you see how frightened she is? Perhaps she'll look this way. Perhaps we can give her a signal. No, Ferret was still hanging onto him with both hands. We must start the fire. That's the only way we can help her. Please, Silvertongue, they'll see you. Don't keep calling me Silvertongue. It gets on my nerves. The old woman disappeared among the houses with Meggie. Flatnose was following them, lumbering like a bear in a black suit, and at last the other men left too. They went down the street, laughing, looking forward to what the night promised them. Death spiced with fear and the appearance of new terror in this accursed village. Only the guard outside Capricorn's house was left. He watched the others go, his face gloomy as he kicked an empty cigarette packet and struck the wall with his fist. He was the only one who was going to miss the fun. Even the guard at the top of the church tower could at least watch the show from a distance. They had expected a guard to be posted outside the house. Ferret had explained the best way to get rid of him, and Silvertongue had nodded and agreed to the plan. When the footsteps of Capricorn's men had died away, and they could hear nothing but the noise from the direction of the parking lot, they moved out of the shadows, acting as if they had only just emerged from the alley, and openly approached the guard side by side. He looked at them suspiciously, pushed himself away from the wall against which he had been leaning, and took the gun from his shoulder. Alarmed, Ferret involuntarily put his hand to his forehead, but at least the guard was not one of the men who might have recognized them. Not the man with the limp, or Basta, or any of Capricorn's other personal henchmen. Hey, lend us a hand, called Silvertongue, ignoring the gun. Those fools forgot Capricorn's armchair. We've been sent to get it. The guard was holding his gun in front of his chest. Oh, for heaven's sake, that thing's so heavy it'd break your back. Where are you from? He scrutinized Silvertongue's face, as if trying to remember whether he had seen it before. He took no notice of Ferret at all. You from the north, then? I heard you have a lot of fun up there. That's right. Silvertongue went so close to the guard that the man took a step back. Come on, you know Capricorn doesn't like to be kept waiting. The guard nodded sullenly. Yes, all right, he muttered, looking over to the church. There's no point standing guard here anyway. What do they think will happen? Do they expect the fire eater to come and steal the gold? That fellow was always lily-livered, and he'll be well away by now. But suddenly, while the guard was still looking at the church, Silvertongue seized the gun and hit him on the head with the butt. Just the first word of the page is butt. Oh, y'all are slow and mature. Ooh, he touched the butt. I don't know how to say it. I feel like I look dumb. Then he dragged him around behind Capricorn's house where it was pitch dark. Did you hear what he said? Ferret had quickly gagged the guard with expertly tying a rope around the man's legs. Dustfinger must have escaped, he said. He'll be well away. He can't have meant anyone else. Yes, I heard, but my daughter is still here. Silvertongue gave him the backpack and looked around. But the square was now so deserted and quiet, it was as if they were the only people left in Capricorn's village. Not a sound was heard from the guard up in the church tower. No doubt, tonight he had eyes only for nothing but the events taking place on the brightly lit football field. Ferret took 2 torches and a bottle of inflammable liquid from Dustfinger's backpack. He got away, he was thinking. He got away. He could almost have laughed out loud. Silvertongue went back to the Capricorn's house, peered into several windows, and finally knocked on one of them. Knocked one of them in. God. Taking off his jacket and pressing it against the glass to muffle the sound when it broke. Laughter and music drifted up from the parking lot. The matches, I can't find them. Ferret rummaged among Dustfinger's things until Silvertongue took the backpack from his hand. Give it to me, he whispered. You get the torches ready. Ferret did as he was told. He carefully soaked the cotton wool in the acrid-smelling spirits. Dustfinger will come back, he thought. He'll come back to look for Gwen, and then he'll fetch me. Voices came from the alleys, men's voices. For a few terrible moments, they seemed to be coming closer. But they died away again, swallowed up by the music coming up from the parking lot and filling the night like a foul smell. Silvertongue was looking for the matches. Ugh, he said, swearing softly and removing his hand from the backpack. Martin droppings were smeared over his thumb. He wiped them off on the nearest wall, put his hand in the pack again, and threw Ferret a box of matches. Then he took something else out, the little book that Dustfinger kept inside his pocket he had sewn inside. Ferret had often looked at it. It had pictures stuck in it, cut out pictures of fairies and witches, trolls and dragons, goblins, nymphs, and ancient trees. Silvertongue flicked through it while Ferret was soaking the second torch. A photograph was lying between the pages. The photograph of Capricorn's maid, the woman who had tried to help Dustfinger and was to die for it tonight. Or had she escaped with him? Silvertongue was staring at the photograph, and suddenly it was as if nothing else in the world existed. What's the matter? Ferret put the match to the dripping torch. The flame flared up, hissing and hungry. How beautiful it was. Ferret licked his finger and passed it through the flame. Here, take this. He held the torch out to Silvertongue. It would be best for him, as the taller of them, to throw it through the window. But Silvertongue just stood there, gazing at the photo. That's the woman who helped Dustfinger, said Ferret. The one they caught, too. I think he's in love with her. Here. Once again he held the burning torch out to Silvertongue. What are you waiting for? Silvertongue looked at him as if he had been woken from a dream. In love? In love, he murmured as he took the torch from Ferret's hand. Then he put the photograph into the breast pocket of his shirt, cast another glance at the empty square, and threw the torch through the broken window into Capricorn's house. Give me a leg up. I want to see it burning, cried Ferret. Silvertongue did as he asked. The room seemed to be some kind of office. Ferret saw paper, a desk, a picture of Capricorn on the wall. Somewhere he could write after all. Someone here could write after all. The burning torch lay among the sheets of paper covered in the writing. It licked and gulped, it whispered with delight at such a feast, flared up and leaped on, from the desk to the curtains at the window. Greedily it consumed the dark fabric. The whole room was filled with red and yellow. Smoke billowed out of the broken window, stinging Ferret's eyes. I must go. Silvertongue put him down abruptly. The music had stopped. Suddenly it was eerily quiet. Silvertongue ran off along the street, leading down to the parking lot. Ferret watched him go. He had something else to do. He waited until the flames were shooting out of the window. Then he began shouting. Fire! Capricorn's house is on fire. His voice echoed over the empty square. Heart thudding, he ran to the corner of the big house and looked up at the church tower. The guard there had leaped to his feet. Ferret lit the second torch and threw it at the church porch. The air began to smell of smoke. The guard froze, turned, and at last he rang the bell. and Farid ran off to follow Silvertongue. Chapter 55. We're moving along. It's called Treachery, Loose Talk, and Stupidity. Damn. It's getting serious. Oh god, dangerous. Dangerous. Break me off a piece of that fancy feast. Coming in sideways. You're good. Stay where you are. Oh my god, what was that? Did you hear that? Dangerous is dangerous. I don't know why I'm singing. Y'all just need to ignore me, I guess. Oh, is this? This is what fell, huh? Damn it. I don't know how I had it now. It was so perfect. I fucked it up. Ugh. It's barely up there, that's why. My bad, Lilac. My bad. I'm trying to get comfy. Sorry. This is difficult and there's stress. There's so many flaps. Oh, you're so cute back there. You should come out over here. Just move the board. She's cuter. Okay. What? I'm ready to start snoring as soon as I start talking. Every time. This excerpt is from Tales from the 1001 Nights, which those of you who are new is actually where Farid is from. He was read out of that book, The 1001 Nights. So kind of interesting. And it's pretty short. It's like one sentence. Then he said, "Without a doubt, I must perish. There is no way I can get out of this narrow prison." That's it. That's the whole thing. How do I get this? I guess I could just leave. You know, it looks stupid. Why does my knee look like that? Ew. I hate it here. Just don't look at me. Look at the book. We're just here for the book. Fucking hell. Okay. Intent. Yeah. Eleanor thought she was showing considerable courage. Oh, we're on Eleanor! Woo! Sorry. I need some water. We're never gonna get started. Someone said I sounded like I was getting a cold. Maybe I'm just talking a lot lately and I'm not used to it. Because we've been streaming a lot more. Okay. Oh, where was I? Eleanor thought she was showing considerable courage. Of course, she still did not know exactly what fate awaited her, and if her niece knew more than she did, she hadn't told her. But she could be sure it would be nothing pleasant. Nor did Teresa give the men who came to take them up from the crypt the satisfaction of seeing her shed tears. She couldn't curse them or shout at them anyway. Her voice was gone, like a garment she no longer wore. Luckily, she had 2 pieces of paper with her, crumpled, dirty scraps, much too small for the words unspoken over 9 years. She had filled the paper with tiny writing until there wasn't space for a single word more. She didn't want to say anything about herself and what had happened to her, and just waved Eleanor's whispered questions impatiently away. Damn, I made y'all big. There were questions of her own she wanted to ask, question after question about her daughter and her husband. Eleanor whispered the questions into her ear very quietly so Basta in the adjoining cell would not realize that the 2 women who were about to die with him had known each other ever since the younger one had learned to walk, holding on to Eleanor's endless bookshelves. Basta was not in a good way. Whenever they looked at him, they saw his hands clinging to the bars, knuckles white under his sun-tanned skin. Once, Eleanor thought she heard him weeping, but when they were taken out of the cells, his face was as vacant as a dead man's. And when their guards locked them up in the unspeakable cage, he crouched on the floor in the corner and sat as motionless as a doll that no one wants to play with. The cage smelled of dogs and raw meat, and indeed it did look like a kennel. Several of Capricorn's men ran the butts of their shotguns along the silvery gray bars before sitting down on the benches that had been made ready for them. Basta, in particular, was the object of enough scorn and derision for 10 men. What's the deal, chicken leg? That's why you're so spoiled. I don't let you do nothing for yourself. Yeah, life's rough for you, huh? I'm not scratching your belly. I'm trying to relax your leg, bruh. God. Where was I? All the same, Eleanor and Teresa kept as far away from him as they could in the same cage. They also kept away from the bars, from all the fingers poking through, the faces the men made at them, and the burning cigarettes flicked at them. They stood close together, both glad and sorry to be with each other. On the outskirts of the arena, right beside the entrance and carefully segregated from the men, sat the women who worked for Capricorn. They showed none of the men's ghastly excitement. Most of their faces were downcast, but again and again their glances strayed over to Risa, with expressions of pity and dread. Capricorn arrived when the long benches were full. There were no seats for the boys, so they had squatted on the ground in front of the blackjackets. His face emotionless, Capricorn strode past them all as if they were nothing but a flock of crows that had assembled at his command. Only in front of the cage containing his prisoners did he slow his pace to examine each of the 3 with a small, satisfied glance. For the fraction of a second, life came back into Basta as his former lord and master stopped by the bars. He raised his head, his eyes pleading silently, like a dog begging for forgiveness. But Capricorn walked on without a word. When he had seated himself back in his black leather armchair, Cockrell placed himself behind it, legs planted wide apart. Obviously, he was the new favorite now. For heaven's sake, stop looking at him like that, Eleanor snapped at Basta when she realized his eyes were still following Capricorn. He's planning to feed you to his friend like a fly to a frog, so how about a little indignation? You were always so ready with the choice of selection of threats. I'll cut your tongue out. I'll slice you to pieces. What's happened to all that, then? But Basta only bowed his head and stared at the floor beneath his boots. Eleanor thought he looked like an oyster with the flesh and the life sucked out of him. When Capricorn was sitting down, the blaring music fell silent, and they brought Maggie forward. They had put a horrible dress on her, but she held her head high, and the old woman they had all called the Magpie had difficulty dragging her up to the rostrum, which the blackjackets had set up in the middle of the field. Hi, Aber. A single chair stood on the rostrum, looking as forlorn as if someone had left it there and forgotten it. Eleanor thought a gallows and a rope would have looked more suitable. Maggie looked down at them as the magpie forced her up the wooden steps. "Hello, darling," called Eleanor, and Maggie's frightened gaze recognized her. "Don't worry, I'm only here because I didn't want to miss hearing you read." Everything had fallen so still on Capricorn's arrival that her voice echoed over the whole arena. It sounded brave and fearless. Fortunately, no one could hear how hard her heart was hammering against her ribs, nor did anyone notice that she was almost choking with fear, for Eleanor had put on her own armor, the impenetrable and extremely useful armor behind which she had always hidden at the times of need. It had become a little harder with every grief she felt, and lately there had been grief enough in Eleanor's life. One of the blackjackets laughed at her words, and a faint smile even flitted over Maggie's face. Eleanor put her arm around Teresa's shoulders and held her close. "Look at your daughter," she whispered, "as brave as... She wanted to compare Maggie to a hero from some story, but all the heroes she could think of were men. And anyway, none of them seemed to be brave enough for the comparison with the girl standing there perfectly straight, scrutinizing Capricorn's blackjackets with her chin jutting out defiantly. The magpie had brought not only Maggie, but an old man. Eleanor guessed that this was the rider who had caused them so much trouble. Finoglio, the creator of Capricorn, Basta, and all the other monsters, including the terrible creature that Maggie was to bring to life tonight. Eleanor had always thought more of the books than their authors, and she looked at the old man without much goodwill as Flatnose let him pass their cage. There was a seat ready for him only a little way from Capricorn's armchair. Eleanor wondered whether that meant that Capricorn had found a new friend, but when Flatnose placed himself behind the grim-faced old man, she concluded that Finoglio was more than likely a prisoner too. Some hydration. Well, it gets kind of dark over here, but there ain't really much I can do about it. It might help a bit. Dunno. That's a bit weird. Capricorn rose as soon as the old man was seated. Without a word, he let his gaze pass slowly over the long line of his men, as if recalling every one of them, remembering what good and bad service each one had done him. The silence in the arena smelled of fear. All the laughter had died away, and not a whisper could be heard. "There is no need," Capricorn finally began, raising his voice, "for me to explain to most of you why the 3 prisoners you see there are to be punished. For the rest, it is enough for me to say it is for treachery, loose talk, and stupidity. One may argue, of course, over whether or not stupidity is a crime deserving of death. I think it is, for it can have exactly the same consequences as treachery." As he said this, there was a restless stir on the benches. At first, Eleanor thought Capricorn's words had set it off, but then she heard the bell. Even Boster raised his head, and its tolling sound through the night. At a sign from Capricorn, Flatnose beckoned to 5 men and strode off with them. Those left behind put their heads together uneasily, and some even jumped up and turned to look at the village. However, Capricorn raised his hand to quell the murmur that had arisen. "It is nothing," he called so loud in a cutting tone that everything immediately fell silent again. "A fire, that's all. And we know how to deal with fire, don't we?" But some of the crowd, both men and women, were still looking anxiously at the houses. So they'd done it. Eleanor bit her lips so hard they hurt. Mortimer and the boy had started a fire. No smoke showed above the rooftops, though reassured, all the faces turned back to Capricorn, who was saying something about deceit and falsehood, discipline and negligence. But Eleanor only half heard him. She kept looking at the houses of the village, though she knew it was dangerous to do so. "So much for the prisoners we have here," cried Capricorn. "Now for those who got away." Cockerel picked up a sack that had been lying behind Capricorn's chair and gave it to him. Smiling, Capricorn put his hand into it and held something up. A piece of fabric from a shirt or a dress, torn and blood-stained. "They are dead," called Capricorn to his audience. "I'd rather have seen them here, of course, but unfortunately there was nothing for it. They were trying to escape and had to be shot. Well, no one will miss the treacherous little fire-eater. Almost all of you knew him, and fortunately Silvertongue has left us his daughter, who has inherited his gifts." Teresa looked at Eleanor, her eyes glazed with horror. "He's lying," Eleanor whispered to her, although she too could not take her eyes off the blood-stained rags. "He's using my lies, my tricks. That's not blood. It's paint. Some kind of dye." But she saw her niece did not believe her. She believed in the blood-stained cloth, just as her daughter did. Eleanor could read this on Maggie's face, and she longed to call out to her that Capricorn was lying. But she wanted to believe his own story for a little longer, to believe they were all dead, and that no one would come to disturb his festivities. "That's right. Boast of a blood-stained rag, you miserable fire-raiser," she shouted through the bars. "That's really something to be proud of. Why do you need another monster? You're all monsters, every one of you sitting there. You murder books, you abduct children." No one took any notice of her. A couple of the blackjackets laughed. Teresa moved closer to the bars, clutching their cold metal with her fingers, never taking her eyes off Maggie. Capricorn left the blood-stained fabric lying over the arm of his chair. "I know that rag," thought Eleanor. "I've seen it somewhere before. They're not dead." Who else would have started? Something inside her whispered, but she refused to listen. No, the story must have a happy ending. It wouldn't be right otherwise. She had never liked sad stories. We're on chapter 56, y'all. English very bad. Thank you. I'm from Oklahoma, but I'm in Colorado right now, in the U.S. So this is the last chapter I'm going to read, but it's a long one. And then this is all that's left. That's crazy. Oh my God, stop. Your queue is empty. Oh, it's because we're... Never mind. Just ignore me. Goodness. So, chapter 56, The Shadow. Page 500. This excerpt is from, I don't know what this is, how to say it. Vala, or the Four Zoas. Vala or the Four Zoas. Ennien's Second Lament by William Blake. My heavens are brass, my earth is iron, my moon is a clod of clay. My sun is pestilence burning at noon, and a vapor of death in the night. Okay. So sleepy. I'm sleepy. Oh my god, no. Stop. Okay, we have like so much books to get through. Stop it. In books, hatred is often described as hot, but at Capricorn's festivities, Meggie discovered it was cold. An ice-cold hand that stops the heart and presses it like a clenched fist against the ribs. Hatred made her freeze. In spite of the mild air wafting around her, telling her that the world was a good, safe place, she knew it was not, as the bloody cloth on which the smiling Capricorn had laid his ringed hand showed all too clearly. Well, so much for that, he cried, and now for the real reason we're all gathered here tonight. Not only are we... Oh my god, stop it. Oh god. Not only are we about to punish the traitors, but we're also going to celebrate a reunion with an old friend. Some of you may remember him, and as for the others, I promise that once you have met him, you will never forget him. Cockrell twisted his thin face into a sour smile. He was obviously not looking forward to the reunion, and at Capricorn's words, alarm showed on several other faces. But that's enough talking. Now let's hear something read aloud to us. Capricorn leaned back in his chair and nodded to the magpie. Mortola clapped her hands, and Darius came hurrying across the arena with the casket Meggie had last seen in the magpie's room. He clearly knew what it contained. His face was even more haggard than usual as he opened the casket and held it out to the magpie. His head bowed humbly. The snakes seemed to be drowsy, and this time Mortola did not put on her glove before she lifted them out. She even draped them over her shoulders while she took the book out of its hiding place. Then she put the snakes back as carefully as if they were precious jewels, closed the lid, and handed the casket back to Darius. He stayed on the rostrum looking awkward. Meggie caught him looking sympathetically at her as the magpie made her sit down on the chair and placed the book on her lap. Here it was again, the unlucky thing, in its brightly colored paper jacket. What color was the binding under it? Raising the dust jacket with her finger, Meggie saw the dark red cloth, as red as the flames surrounding the ink-black heart. Everything that had happened had begun between the pages of this book, and only the words of its author could save them now. Meggie stroked its binding as she always did before opening a book. She had seen Mo doing the same. Ever since she could remember, she had known that movement, the way he would pick up a book, stroke the binding almost tenderly, then open it as if he were opening a box full to the brim with precious things. Of course, the marvels you hope to find might not be inside the covers, so then you close the book. I can't do this, oh my god. I'm gonna make you yawn. I know I'm gonna have everybody falling asleep in here. Sorry that its promise had not been kept, but Inkheart was not a book of that kind. Badly told stories never come to life. There are no dust fingers in them, nor even a basta. I am told to tell you something. The magpie's dress smelled of musty lavender, its fragrance enveloping Meggie in a suffocating threat. Should you fail to do what Capricorn asks, should it occur to you to stumble over the words on purpose, or distort them so the guest Capricorn is expecting does not come, then... Mortola paused, and Meggie felt the old woman's breath on her cheek. Cockrell will cut the old man's throat. Capricorn may not give the order himself because he believes the stupid lies the old man told him, but I don't. And Cockrell will do as I say. Understand me, my little cherub? She pinched Maggie's cheek with her bony fingers. Meggie shook off her hand and looked at Cockrell. He moved up behind Finoglio, smiled at her, and ran a finger across the old man's throat. Finoglio pushed him away and looked at Meggie as if one look could convey everything he wanted to say to her and give her. Encouragement, comfort, and maybe even amusement in the face of all the horror surrounding them. Whether or not their plan worked depended on him and his words, and Maggie's reading. Maggie felt the paper in her sleeve, scratching her skin. Her hands seemed like the hands of a stranger as she leafed through the pages of the book. The place where she was to begin, no longer marked by a folded corner. A bookmark as black as charred wood lay between the pages. "Push your hair back from your forehead," Finoglio had told her. "That will be the signal to me." But just as she raised her left hand, the crowd on the benches became restless again. Flatnose was back, with soot marks on his face. He hurried up to Capricorn's side and whispered something to him. Capricorn frowned and looked toward the houses. Now Maggie saw 2 plumes of smoke rising from the sky beside the church tower. Capricorn rose quickly from his chair. He tried to sound composed, ironic, like a man amused at some childish prank, but his face told a different story. "I am sorry to have to spoil the fun for a few more of you, but tonight the red rooster is crowing here too. A feeble little rooster, but its neck must be wrung all the same. Flatnose, take another 10 men back with you." Flatnose obeyed and marched off with his reinforcements. The benches now looked a good deal emptier. "And don't any of you show your faces back here before you found the fire raiser," Capricorn called after them. "Whoever it is, we'll teach him not to start fires in the devil's own domain. We'll teach him a lesson right here and now." Someone laughed, but most of those who had stayed behind were looking uneasily in the direction of the village. Some of the maids had actually risen to their feet, but the magpie called their names in a sharp voice, and they were quick to sit back down with the others, like school children unfairly slapped on the hand. I have hiccups now, seriously? Why am I shaking my water? It's just habit. Dong. Tiny little dog. No, can't really see the names. You can now, right? Freaking lights. Where did I go? Nonetheless, the restlessness persisted. Scarcely anyone was looking at Maggie. Almost all the members of her audience had turned their backs to her and were pointing at the smoke and whispering to one another. A red glow was creeping up the church tower, and a gray smoke formed a dense cloud above the rooftops. "What is all this? Why are you staring at that little wisp of smoke?" There was no missing the anger in Capricorn's voice now. A bit of smoke, a few flames, so what? Are you going to let that spoil our festivities? Fire is our best friend. Have you forgotten? Maggie saw the doubting faces turn back toward him. When she heard a name, Dustfinger, a woman's voice had called it out. "What does that mean?" Capricorn's voice was so sharp that Dustfinger almost dropped the casket of snakes. "There is no Dustfinger anymore. He's lying up there in the hills with his mouth full of earth and that marten of his on his breast. I never want to hear his name again. He is forgotten as if he had never been." "That's not true." Maggie's voice rang out over the arena so loud and clear that she herself was alarmed. "He's here." She held up the book. "Never mind what you do to him. Everyone who reads this story will see him. You can even hear his voice and see the way he laughs and breathes fire." All went perfectly quiet. A few feet scraped uneasily on the red, rough surface of the old football field. Then, suddenly, Maggie heard something behind her. It was a ticking like the sound of a clock, yet not quite the same. It sounded like a human tongue imitating a clock. Tick, 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 tick. The sound was coming from among the cars parked behind the wire fence with their dazzling headlights on. Maggie couldn't help it. She looked around, in spite of the magpie and all the suspicious eyes turned on her. She could have kicked herself for being so stupid. Suppose they had seen it too. The thin figure rising among the cars and quickly ducking down again. but no one seemed to have noticed her glance any more than the ticking. "A very fine speech," said Capricorn slowly, "but you're not here to make funeral orations for dead traitors. You're here to read aloud, and I'm not going to tell you so again." Maggie forced herself to look at Capricorn. She mustn't look at the cars again. Suppose that had really been Farid. Suppose she hadn't imagined the ticking. The magpie was watching her suspiciously. Perhaps she had heard it too, that soft, harmless ticking. Nothing but a tongue clicking against someone's teeth. What did it mean? Unless you knew the story of Captain Hook, and his fear of the crocodile with the ticking clock inside it, the magpie wouldn't have read it, but Mo knew Maggie would understand his signal. He had woken her up often enough with that ticking sound, right behind her ear, so close that it tickled. "Breakfast time, Maggie," he used to whisper. "The crocodile's here." That was it. Mo knew she would recognize the ticking that helped Peter Pan to go aboard Captain Hook's. Oh my god. Mo knew she would recognize the ticking that helped Peter Pan to go aboard Captain Hook's ship and rescue Wendy. He couldn't have given her a better signal. Wendy, thought Maggie. What had happened next? For a moment, she almost forgot where she was. But the magpie reminded her. She slapped Maggie's face with the flat of her hand. "Start reading, will you, little witch?" she hissed. And so Maggie obeyed. Hastily, she removed the black bookmark from the pages where it lay. She must hurry. She must read before Mo did anything silly. He didn't know what she and Finoglia were planning to do. "I'm going to start now, and I don't want anyone disturbing me," she cried. "Anyone. Is that understood?" Oh, please let Mo understand, she thought. Please. A few of Capricorn's remaining men laughed, but Capricorn himself leaned back and folded his arms in anticipation. "Yes, just you take heed of what the girl said," he called. "Anyone who disturbs her will be given to the shadow to welcome him here." Hey. Dang. That's big. I think I want to get that thing. Dang, that's really big, though, for outside even. That's huge. Holy shit. It's like 54 inches tall. It's taller than me. No, wait. I'm like 56, right? I'm 5'2". I'm like all 52 inches. No, that's not right. I'm 65 inches. Or something. Maggie put 2 fingers up her sleeve. There they were, Finoglio's words. She looked at the magpie. "Well, she's disturbing me," she said out loud. "I can't read with her standing so close behind me." Capricorn gestured impatiently to the magpie. Mortola's face looked sour, as if he told her to eat a bar of soap. But she took 2 or 3 reluctant steps back. That would have to do. Maggie raised her hand and pushed her hair back from her forehead. The signal for Finoglio. He instantly launched into his performance. "No, no, no, she's not to read," he cried, moving toward Capricorn before Cockerel could stop him. "I can't allow it. I'm the author of this story, and I didn't write it to be misused for the purposes of violence and murder." Cockerel tried to put his hand over Finoglio's mouth, but Finoglio bit his fingers and sidestepped him with more agility than Maggie would ever have expected of the old man. "I invented you," he bellowed as Cockerel chased him around Capricorn's chair. "And I'm sorry I did, you stinking devil of a villain." Then he ran off. Cockerel didn't catch up with Finoglio until he reached the cage containing the prisoners, and in revenge for the mockery and laughter coming from the benches, he twisted the old man's arm behind his back, so viciously that Finoglio let out a cry of pain. Yet, when Cockerel dragged him back to Capricorn's side... Okay, squirrels. Finoglio was looking pleased, because he knew he had given Maggie plenty of time. They had rehearsed it often enough. Her fingers had been shaking as she took the sheet of paper. She had a paper out of her sleeve, but no one noticed anything when she slipped it into the pages of the book, not even the magpie. "How the old man boasts," cried Capricorn. "Do I look as if an old fellow like that invented me?" There was more laughter. The smoke above the rooftop seemed to have been forgotten. Cockerel put his hand over Finoglio's mouth. "Once again, and I hope this will be the last time," said Capricorn to Meggie. "Start reading." Do I have something open? I feel air. I guess it's just coming in from there. I think I just got super windy or something. It's probably the cold front coming in. You feel that too? My arm is going to sleep over here. Oh my god. Scared me. You are so close. Holy shit. What's the weather say? Rain. It's gonna be colder the next 2 days and then it'll get kind of warm again. Was that thunder? I don't know. Stuff's falling on my camper outside. Oh, I think about lines on my face. Okay, we're like almost done, guys. Okay, we're in a dramatic part, okay? Come on, let's finish. Sorry for yelling. Where am I? Her fingers had been shaking as she took the sheet of paper out of her sleeve, but no one noticed anything when she slipped it into the pages of the book, not even the magpie. "How the old man boasts," cried Capricorn. "Do I look as if an old fellow like that invented me?" There was more laughter. The smoke above the rooftop seemed to have been forgotten. Cockerel put his hand over Finoglio's mouth. "Once again, I hope this will be the last time," said Capricorn to Meggie. "Start reading. The prisoners have waited long enough for their executioner." Silence fell again, and once more it smelled of fear. Meggie bent over the book on her lap. The letters seemed to dance on the pages. "Come out," thought Meggie. "Come out and save us. Save us all. Eleanor and my mother, Mo and Farid. Save Dustfinger if he's still alive. And save Basta too, for all I care." Her tongue felt like a little animal that had found refuge in her mouth and was now butting its head against her teeth. "Capricorn had many men," she began, "and every one of them was feared in the surrounding towns and villages. They stink of cold smoke, they stink of sulfur, and everything that reminds you of fire. Whenever one of them passed by, people closed their doors and hid under the stairs with their children. They called them Firefingers and Bloodhounds. Capricorn's men had many names. They were feared by day and by night. They made their way into dreams and poisoned them. But there was one who was feared even more than Capricorn's villains." Meggie felt as if her voice was growing stronger with every word she read. It seemed to grow until it filled the arena. "Folk called him the Shadow." 2 more lines at the bottom of the page. Then turn it over. Finoglio's words were waiting. "Look at this, Meggie," he had whispered when he showed her the sheet of paper. "What an artist I am, eh? Is there anything in the world better than words on the page? Magic signs, the voices of the dead, building blocks to make wonderful worlds better than this one. Comforters, companions in loneliness, keepers of secrets, speakers of truth, all those glorious words." "Taste every word, Meggie," whispered Mo's voice inside her. "Savor it on your tongue. Do you taste the colors? Do you taste the wind and the night, the fear and the joy, and the love? Taste them, Meggie, and everything will come to life." Folk called him Capricorn's shadow. "He came only when Capricorn called him," she read. "Sometimes he was red as fire, sometimes gray as the ash to which fire turns all that it devours. He darted out of the earth as fast as flames licked their way up wood. His fingers and even his breath brought death. He rose before the master's feet, soundless, faceless, scenting his way like a hound on the trail, waiting for his master to point to the victim. It was said that Capricorn had commanded one of the trolls who understand the whole art of fire and smoke to create the shadow from the ashes of his victims. No one was sure, for it was also said that Capricorn had ordered those who called the shadow of life to be killed. The shadow to life to be killed. All that everyone knew was that he was immortal, invulnerable and pitiless, like his master. Maggie's voice died away as if the wind had blown it from her lips. Something was rising from the gravel that covered the football field. It grew taller, it stretched its ashen limbs. The night air suddenly stank of sulfur. That stench burned Maggie's eyes so that the letters blurred. But she must go on reading, while the eerie creature grew taller and taller. Yet one night, a mild and starlit night, the shadow heard not Capricorn's voice when it was called forth, but the voice of a girl. And when she called his name, he remembered. He remembered all those from whose ashes he was made, all the pain and all the grief. The magpie reached over Maggie's shoulders. "What's this? What are you reading?" But Maggie jumped up and backed away before the old woman could snatch the sheet of paper away from her. "He remembered," she read on in a loud, clear voice, "and he was determined to be avenged upon those who were the cause of all this misfortune, whose cruelty poisoned the whole world." "Make her stop!" Was that Capricorn's voice? Maggie almost fell off the rostrum as she tried to keep away from the magpie. Darius stood there, staring at her in astonishment, the casket in his hands. Then suddenly but deliberately, as if he had all the time in the world, he put down the casket and wrapped his thin arms firmly around the magpie from behind. Nor did he let go, no matter how hard she struggled and cursed, and Maggie read on as the shadow stood, watching her. The figure had no face, that was true, but it had eyes, terrible eyes, red as the embers of hidden fire. "Get the book away from her," shouted Capricorn. He was standing in front of his chair, bent double as he feared his legs would refuse to obey him if he took so much as a step toward the shadow. "Get it away from her." But none of his remaining men moved. None of the boys and none of the women came to his aid. They had eyes for nothing but the shadow as he stood there listening to Maggie's voice, as if she were telling him a long-forgotten tale. But it wasn't easy to kill, even if someone else was going to do it for her. So the shadow went to his master and reached out to him with ashen hands. How soundlessly it moved, that terrible, gigantic figure. Maggie stared at Finoglio's next sentence, and Capricorn fell down on his face, and his black heart stopped beating. She couldn't say it. She couldn't. It had all been in vain. Then suddenly, someone else was standing behind her. She hadn't even noticed him climbing up onto the rostrum. The boy was there too, holding a shotgun aimed at the benches, but no one sitting there stirred. No one so much as lifted a finger to save Capricorn. And Mo took the book from Maggie's hands, ran his eyes over the lines Finoglio had added, and in a firm voice he read to the end of what the old man had written. And Capricorn fell down on his face, and his black heart stopped beating, and all those who had gone burning and murdering with him disappeared, blown away like ashes in the wind. That's heavy. That's heavy stuff.